Okay, hi everyone. Hopefully you can see my screen and hear me well. Добрый день. My name is Marco, and thank you for taking the time to attend this presentation. So for the start, I want to ask you to go to the slido.com. Probably you already know this, and use this TCM 2020 code, so you could access the hall number 3, the room number 3, and hopefully ask me some questions during the presentation, and I will gladly answer them at the end. Okay, so at the beginning, a few words about myself. So my name is Marko Manic, as I already said. I come from Belgrade, Serbia. I'm working as a QA engineer in high-tech engineering center company here in Belgrade. Professionally, I'm really passionate about test automation, continuous integration, continuous delivery, pipelines, and so on. Also about the security testing, application error logging, and stuff like that. As well, I'm an author and lecturer at QA engineer course. Sorry, I'm hearing an echo. And also proud father of a small girl. She's 2 years old. And I love sports, especially basketball and football. Also love cars and traveling and hanging out with my friends. Okay, so let's go to the subject. So behavior-driven development. Probably many of you have already heard something about BDD, or maybe some of you had a chance to apply it on your private or commercial projects. But for the beginning, let's just say what is the purpose of this behavior-driven development concept. So the purpose is to have technical and non-technical people, but which are included in developing the software from the beginning, to have the same understanding of the feature that is going to be implemented. Probably most of you came to the situation where at the late phase of software development, maybe even during the user acceptance testing. Oh, there is an echo again. Okay, let's continue. Team can discover that maybe requirements that came from the customer were different than what team thought at the beginning, or what the product owner imagined, and whatever, and then there can be a problem. BDD is there to prevent these situations to even happen. Test cases in this concept are called scenarios, and they're written in Gherkin language. So here on the next slide, we can see an example of a Gherkin scenario. So we can maybe make some analogy and compare it with traditional test case. So you can see here that scenario name actually represents the name of the test case. In the traditional test cases, we have preconditions. Here it's called given step. So here is our example of the test scenario. So given you are interested in learning more about BDD, and another precondition, and you're attending this presentation. So then we come to the action steps, which are called when. So when this presentation is finished and you have listened carefully, then we're coming to the assertions or the expected result of our test case, which is called then here. Then you should be able to understand the benefits of BDD.
преимущества BDD. Это способ написания тест-кейсов, называемый тест-сценариями для BDD. И справа вы можете видеть пример для реального проекта. На самом деле он
I think most of this presentation today will be actually the demo, and we will dive into code a bit, and I will show you some examples so you can understand better, and then you will be able to see what is the usage of these parameters, this table here, and so on. Having in mind that you saw how one test case looks in BDD, you can understand that probably people that are coming from the business domain, and for example, reading the test report that we have created after some regression testing or whatever, it's probably easier for them to understand what was actually tested. They're not so interested in actual code. They're not so interested in code behind these steps and what was written and in which programming language, etc. They just want to understand what was tested and see the results of that. With this concept, we are getting this information closer to them. Of course, advantages, from my opinion, are also on the side of the engineers themselves, because BDD tools are making our implementation easier, because they're saving lines of code. You will see that in a few minutes. You can reuse the same implementation, the same steps many times, and there are also a lot of interesting tricks and tips. How can you generate your test data? How can you do the cleanup afterwards, and things like that. Okay, so let's now proceed to see in behavior-driven development how are actually the requirements from the end customer, are being transferred to the completed product. So at the beginning, we have these two roles. This female person represents our product owner in the team, and this is a customer or user. So initially, our PO listens to requirements and demands of a user. They have a conversation about what they need, and then the PO will sit down together with the development team and try to process this and make something out of it. So the next step will be, so we have our PO, here we have our developer, and of course the policeman is a QA. Many people see QA engineers as a policeman in the team, so that's why we use this figure here. So next step is that product owner, developer, and QA elaborate these requirements together. Maybe QA and developer will have some technical questions. Maybe they will say to the PO that things cannot be done in a way that was imagined initially, but it's really important that they are on the same ground from the beginning, and that everyone in the team understand what needs to be done. And then after that is completed and we have really acceptance criteria in place, the requirements can be defined directly in form of BDD scenarios. So instead of having traditional acceptance criteria line by line, you can have them already in that form that we already saw in Gherkin scenario, or they can be written traditionally and then transferred by some team member in BDD scenarios. One of the greatest advantages of BDD is that QA engineer doesn't have to be the only person writing these scenarios. You saw that it's really easy and understandable to everyone, so everyone can write them, even the business analyst or the PO or whoever. And then when the team decides to automate some of it, then they will write the code behind it, but actual scenarios can be written by anyone. So once we have them, then these two roles of developer and QA are splitting up into two different routes. So developer will use these scenarios as a guide for development, and also to use them to write automated tests that are his responsibility. It's not our subject today, but of course we have a testing pyramid and different kinds of tests. So maybe if a developer's responsibility is to write some lower level tests such as unit test or special integration test, BDD is not so good for the unit test, but there are also concepts like conjunction with TDD, test-driven development, together with BDD, and developer will use that to write his tests and also as a guide for development. And on the other side, QA will use these scenarios to write their own acceptance tests, or maybe use it if he wants only for manual testing. At the end, once everything is tested using these BDD scenarios, we'll have a happy customer, happy user with everything in place, the whole functionality there. Okay, so now we will come one step closer to our demo and demonstration. So what we will do, we will take one real life example, we will take one user story. It's something that is understandable to everyone and common to most of the regular web applications. So the description of this user story goes like this. As a guest user, I want to be able to register an account so that I can work with the restricted website content. So the idea is to develop functionality to end users so they could create an account, and what we want to do is test that, make some tests out of it. So the acceptance criteria is like this. Probably we can work out more acceptance criteria for this kind of story, but here we want to showcase only a few examples, and the focus will be on BDD. So it's not so important to have every possible edge case. So we want to test that user can actually register an account. We also want to test that registered users cannot initiate the registration flow. So some negative case, let's say like that. And we want to see that it is not possible to complete registration without filling in all mandatory fields, and that registered users can sign in to the app. These 4 acceptance criteria in our test automation project will be used as 4 different scenarios. Before we dive into the code, I just want to say a few words about the tools that are going to be used, and generally about the tools regarding BDD. So the community and support for the tools for behavior-driven development is quite big. Personally, I come from the .NET world, and I write my tests in the C#, and that's why I'm using a spec flow. But there are people working in Java, JavaScript, or whatever you have there, Cucumber on market, and many other tools. And I think that the documentation for both Cucumber and SpecFlow are really good, and you can really find your way into what you need. So today we will use Selenium. Those will be some UI tests. Of course, I'm using BDD for the API tests as well, so they are suitable for all levels of acceptance testing. The code will be written in C#. We will run them using NUnit. So let's just open my Visual Studio, and then we can see what we have here. Hopefully, I will maybe zoom in a bit. I'm not sure what is the size of the screen in the where you're watching, so maybe it's better like this. Okay, at the beginning, I want to show you the structure of a project. So as I said, focus of today's presentation is BDD. It's not actual automation, and I took into consideration that probably some of you are, most certainly some of you are not writing your code in C#. You're using different programming languages. So I've tried to structure the code as understandable as possible, so that people from any technologies can understand what was written, and just to switch the focus to BDD, not the actual code and methods and functions and so on. So this is the project that has a structure of 4 folders. First folder is features folder, where we will keep our feature files. On the presentation, you already saw some examples similar to this. So in the spec flow, if you pull this NuGet package into your project, you will be allowed to create this type of files, with special extension, the feature file, and there you're storing your test scenarios. Okay, we'll go back to that just to continue with showing the structure. The next one is helpers. We will have some basic and standard configuration here. So some base class where we will initiate the project and do some things. You're noticing some keywords here that are also coming from the spec flow, which I will comment on a bit later. We're having some test constants here for our test. Maybe some of you are watching the TV show called The Blacklist, and you know this name, Ilya Koslov. I've used it for my test. And we have some utilities class for some common methods that are being used, generic methods that are being used more than once in our project. You're probably noticing that we will use page object pattern here. and we have mapped our web elements from our pages to a separate classes. We have a few of them here, nothing specially, pretty simple structure, and we saw the feature file here with some of the test scenarios, and the implementation behind those is in our steps class. So basically, SpecFlow is allowing you to have a binding between your feature file and your regular class, which is used for steps implementation, and you can easily to its definition, to its step definition and implementation. Binding is allowing us to do that. Okay, that's something in general about the project. So let's just showcase a few of the things that are actually closely connected to the SpecFlow and BDD concept. First thing, you notice that here we have transferred our description of the user story as description of our feature file. This is also an advantage for the business people. When they take a look of our testing report, they can connect this to a user story which was developed and find how it was tested. The next thing we see here is a tag. So tags are quite useful thing because you can you can use how many tags you want for each scenario, even use them for the feature file. You can mark your scenarios, and if you want to run only a group of scenarios by sorting them with this tag, you can do that. You see here that we can also, we have two types of tags here, my account, and in the other feature file, the TestCon tag, and we can only run things like that. Another more powerful thing is probably once you put these tests into your continuous integration pipelines, you can create the pipelines in a way that, for example, if you have separate parts of the system with separate pipelines, you can extract, okay, I want this set of tests for my authorization service, for example. I will mark my tests with authorization tag and include them in pipeline, and only those test scenarios will be run. Another thing is, for example, you see here that this is purple. We will see in a few minutes why it is, because there is no implementation of this behind. You can, for example, put just ignore tag, and then if you run the set of tests, the test scenarios with the ignore tag will not be run. So that is something that is by default. Another thing, one of the advantages is steps reusability. You notice here that we have a number of steps that are repeating. So we have given user open sign in, given user open sign in, and many times. The good thing is that each of these steps, once we go into its implementation, I'm just hoping it will open now. It's a bit stuck. Okay, here it is. So each of them in 4 scenarios will go to these 2 lines of code. It's a common implementation anytime you call the step like this. So you don't have to repeat your lines of code. We have a bit more complex steps, such as this one that has parameter inside of it. It's the same thing like here. So you can just navigate through it. Let's just wait for the Visual Studio to, okay, and then you will see that parameter is passed in this method, and you can decide which type of parameter. It can be string, integer, it can be HTTP status code, whatever you like. And one thing that I left on purpose is this. So you can see that this step is named exactly the same as this one, and both of them have this parameter, which of course can be different because it's a parameter. It's not a static thing. It's not hard-coded. But in this scenario, it's not recognized and it's purple. And if we want to navigate, it will say to us, there is no matching step binding found for this step. Do you want to create one? For now, we'll say no, because there is a nice trick. This is happening because here, this is considered as a given step. Every end after a given is given. Here, this is a when, and SpecFlow cannot recognize that. That's why, if we navigate into our given step, just a second for the Visual Studio, okay. We navigate there, and we change the given to step definition. Is another keyword from the spec flow, and we save this. Let's wait a second for it to respond. And then we go back to our feature file. We will see that this is no longer purple, and it will use that implementation. So it's good because sometimes you want to use the same actions, same step for it to be a precondition. Sometimes it will be an action point. It will be a when. And then by using this step definition keyword, you can do that. So you save even more lines of code. For the parameters, we already show things that can be done. I've used on purpose this implementation here. For example, we have a step, user doesn't enter all required personal details, and here he's entering. I will go into that method just to show you. So we are using the, just for you to imagine what can you do with this parameter. So we are using the here switch. All of the steps are the same, but for the one test, we want them to skip and not enter this mandatory field, because that's the expectation in our test case. So we are passing this string here, and if it enters, then do this. If it's not, just continue. This is good because in the API test, for example, you can pass the HTTP status code there. You can do all sorts of assertions there. So that's something I want to leave it to you and to investigate further on. As I said, the documentation is really good, and what can you do with the reporting and parameters and so on. Another thing I want to demonstrate for the BDD and its advantage is something that is being used in our base class. Probably most of you have this type of class in your test automation project, well, depending on the technology you're using, and it's used for some basic and standard configuration. Here we see that since we have included spec flow, we are able to use this before scenario keyword. It's allowing us to actually prepare things before we even execute a scenario. So the common thing we want to do on every test scenario is, of course, make an instance of our Chrome driver. So bring out the browser. Then to maximize this browser, we want to navigate to some URL. Here we have our app config file where we are storing our URL for the live environment. We can have a few keys here for the different environments. For example, we are in this simple example using like this live environment, and then we navigate to our URL. And this can be done before scenario, so that doesn't have to be done repeatedly in every scenario itself. Another thing is after scenario. So after each test execution, we can put whatever we want and mark it like here. So we are just quitting our browser. The good thing is that you can go even in more details, and this is before and after scenario is in general. You can do it for some specific scenarios if you want, and then the tags come in place, the tags that I mentioned. So for example, you can say only before scenarios with this tag, do these actions, not for the others. And then, of course, your test suite will behave like that. Another thing you can do is do something before the whole feature. Maybe you don't want to do these things before each scenario. Maybe you want to use your API calls to make some requests before going into the whole feature. You can say, okay, before feature, and then, oh, sorry. Before feature, and then create a method below it, and then do some things before the whole feature starts the execution. So it's quite nice thing to do, and it again saves some code. We were talking about the things you want to do before and the part of the test preparation. I will show you one more thing, which is a powerful and useful thing in BDD. So we said that, okay, we saved few lines of code by reusing the same implementation behind this user open sign-in page. But then again, we had to write it 4 times here. So every test scenario starts with given user open sign-in page. What we can do is use a background. So this also comes from a spec flow. So we say a background, and then we say given user open sign-in page. And I will tell you what this does. So this allows us to delete this step from every scenario that we have, because background is working in a way that it will execute steps from the background before each scenario. So then we also saved a few lines of code like this. You can make your background more complex, of course. We are using pretty simple examples here. But yeah, that's just something to think about when using the spec flow and using the BDD in general. Most of the things, I think all of the stuff that I'm mentioning here and the syntax and the keywords are also available in other tools such as Cucumber that are for different programming languages and for different technologies. Okay, so let's just return things as they were. Okay, and another thing that is SpecFlow doing for us, as you can see, SpecFlow is doing a lot of things instead of us, which is quite good. It saves us time. Another thing here, we have this test feature, and it's not these are not real tests. We are not testing the actual web application. Here I wanted to show you another thing. So you saw my steps class. This is the steps class that is behind the feature file, and this binding is allowing us actually to connect with our steps there. You can see here that this is the same string that we have in the feature file, and by having the step type here given and the binding keyword at the beginning of our class, SpecFlow recognizes that and goes directly here and executes the code. You're probably wondering, did I have to write this step by step and copy paste everything that I wrote in the feature file, etc., etc.? No, the answer is no, and we will see now how it is being done. So once we write this scenario here, then if we go right-click in any of the steps, SpecFlow is allowing us to generate step definitions automatically. So we will go here, and then he will offer us option to select for which steps we want to generate our structure, our empty methods. Later on, inside of these empty methods, we will write our code, we will call the methods, we will apply our page object pattern or whatever, but we will have the whole structure, and the only thing that is left to do, that we need to do, is just to write the actual implementation. So I will say, okay, generate for me this empty method, generate the whole class for me, and name it like this, because this is some of the standard practices to name your steps class by calling it the feature name and then the steps. And I will say generate, and it will ask me where do you want to put this. I will find the appropriate folder. So beside my existing authentication steps, I want to place this class. I will say that, and what SpecFlow did for us, you see that this is no longer purple, so the binding is there. And if we open this, the whole structure is created for us. It even recognized the type of the parameters that we want to pass there and mark them as integer. Another thing that you can see here that we couldn't saw on the previous feature file is this scenario outline that we are using. So the scenario outline is probably one of my favorite features of the SpecFlow and this concept, is because it's allowing you to have one scenario, one implementation for this scenario, and then you have 10 tests, for example, out of this one scenario. Here we have 2 rows. It means we have 2 tests. You can have many parameters here. It doesn't have to be 2. You can have them as many as you want. And how many rows you have here, that is how many tests you will have. What it does, it goes row by row and takes these values from this examples table and put them here in place of this parameter. So this is a simple test which you get once you create a default feature file, and it says given the first number is 50 and then the second number is 70, the 2 numbers are added, the result should be 120. And then it will just go back and start from the beginning and execute the second test. You see here that we have 2 tests, and it will take the values from the second row. You can utilize this examples table in many ways you want. I think at the beginning I mentioned I was also a lecturer at this QA engineer course, and for example, people and attendees of this course, they've used scenario outline in a way. Imagine you have a website and you have a footer and you need to test that I don't know, 10, 15 links from the footer are leading to appropriate pages. You will write one scenario for it because everything is the same. Only the labels and the names of this object you want to click in are different, and you will put them here and you will have 10, 15 rows with, okay, click on this and go to this page name. Click on this and go to this page name, and then one scenario will be 10 tests. Okay, so that is something I wanted to show and demonstrate to you regarding the actual automation and the actual code. Before we go back to the presentation, just to repeat myself, so these were simple examples. Didn't want to go into more complex things. I just wanted to intrigue you. If you haven't used BDD so far, or you are thinking about using it, to just imagine what can you do. And as I said, the documentation is pretty good. You can find a lot of examples online. So I just want to encourage you to maybe try it out and to see if it makes sense for you to use it on your private or maybe commercial projects that you have. So let's go back to our presentation. Okay, so I want to summarize things that we talked about today. So things you need to remember regarding the BDD is that test scenarios, as you saw, are written in a form understandable by everyone. This is really important for I don't know, business people who are interested in having the test results. Many of you are probably working in a way that after some 2 weeks cycles or whatever, when you have your releases, there are people from the business layer that are interested to see the test reports and they want to see what was tested. You can structure your test reports in a way to just show the results of these BDD scenarios, and it's fun and useful for them to see what was tested. And also, as I said at the beginning, it's possible for them to provide requirements to you in this way, for them to write it at the beginning, and then at the end they will see the results of the things they wrote, the tests they wrote, because they're not big fans of code and probably some of them don't understand it, and they want to see the concrete stuff. Another thing that we already said now is that everyone can write them. I want to just switch for a second to share some experience that I had from my previous commercial project that I worked in my company. So we made actually some conjunction between test-driven development and behavior-driven development. And it was quite fun because our customer was having requirements for our developers to write unit tests and they were not big fans of writing the unit tests, and we're not so happy about it. But then we find a way, okay, let's sit down together and make some common ground between test-driven development, behavior-driven development, between QA engineers and developers. And then what we did is basically, as a definition of ready, before the sprint has started, so in previous sprint, we sat down together and went through requirements, and then we wrote the BDD scenarios together and decided, okay, you will implement these things on your side. We will have unit and integration tests for that, and it's your responsibility. And me as a QA engineer, I will do that on the acceptance layer. So we split amongst ourselves these scenarios, and it's fun. And I think that it's easier for developers to write the tests when it's done in this way. And for me, what is important, that code coverage rises in that way, and developers are thinking about the tests more and thinking about the tests first, because before the implementation. And of course, someone will say, this takes more time. Yeah, it takes more time in the beginning, but you will save time later on when in the testing phase, because it's smaller chance for myself as a QA engineer to return some task to a developer to find an issue, because we are on the same ground from the beginning. And also we are in this way putting the business concept and business logic behind the feature that is being developed more closer to developers. Another thing is that BDD test scenarios can be utilized both for manual and automated testing. Maybe you have a younger colleague, junior colleague in the team that is starting with automation. It's only doing manual tests. He can use this to execute it manually, or he can write them and then you can automate them, or he can slowly start kicking off with the automation like this. So I think it's a quite nice thing to do. We already saw and mentioned that running the same test case with the same implementation, only with different test data, it's pretty clear and makes our life easier. Test data preparation is also clean. You can use your tags to mark what you want to prepare for which scenario, for which feature file, and to clean up afterwards as well. Assertions you were able to, so basically you are free to do assertions as you want. The only thing that BDD allows you that you have parameterized assertions, so in one step you can do different assertions depending on the parameter that you're passing. And the tooling support is really good. I want to repeat this again, because even though I showcased the code in C#, even though if you're using the different programming language, you will be able to do that. One thing for the end, before we go to the questions and answers, just to say, everything that we saw and the test scenarios written in Gherkin language in given, when, then form is really documentation itself. So it can use as a documentation, and it can help you out to onboard new team members like that, to people to get to know the domain better, and just kick off their onboarding process easily. So that's it from my side. Thank you for listening, and now I will try to transfer to Slido and see if there are any questions for the end. If someone have maybe later on more questions or anything, you can find me on LinkedIn, you can write me an email. I will be happy to answer you in the next days or month or whatever. If you want to try out something like this, you can reach me out anytime. So let's go here and see if we had some questions or not. I'm not sure if I'm on the right side of the page. To me, it looks like we don't have questions. If someone from organization can correct me, or maybe we have some questions from the on-site visitors. Okay, here are the questions. Okay, the first one. What's main advantage of BDD on simple AT? Okay, so AT, I assume it's automation testing. So the first advantage is that other people can collaborate. So it can save you time as an engineer that will do the automation. Someone else can write these scenarios and you can only do the coding behind it. And the other thing is that it's understandable by everyone. So you will have some manager in the team and he wants to know what was tested. He doesn't have to go into code and watch the lines of code, and by looking at the function's name and method's name to see what was tested, he can see on plain text words easily that. So let's say just that, and that are the well-known advantages. But personally, for me, it's easier for me to do the automation because I can design my test scenarios by using those examples table. It's powerful usage of parameters, passing the parameters. So for me, it's also clear to find my way into a test solution that someone else wrote. That's it. The minuses of BDD. Okay, so the minuses of BDD, it's a hard question for myself because people who know me know that I'm a big fan of it. The only thing maybe that people will say that are minuses, okay, we can all do this without writing these fancy test scenarios. That will someone say, and of course that is something that I can understand for maybe projects that are not long-term. For the long-term projects, I think it's good to invest time in writing this kind of test scenarios. For the ones that are short projects that will last only a few months, just do the testing in a way that is easier for you, not to take developers' time or not to invest to write these scenarios and maintain them. Maintenance is one more thing that could be advantage or minus. Minus, it depends how you design your tests. So you need to try to use this parameter as much as possible so you can easily maintain your tests. If you hard code things and don't reuse steps, you will have a hard time with maintenance. TDD plus BDD, are you the only one who does it? Hopefully not. That's something that we worked out together in a team, and our developers actually liked it because they were, as I said, not big fans of writing the unit tests, and in this way, and they also had a problem because we were new to the project was big, and they didn't have business context to the project we are working on. In this way, they understood the business logic that they needed to develop better, and it helped them get the ideas for what they need to write the unit tests. Of course, they are not actually transferring these scenarios to their test project of unit tests, but it helps them to know what to test and helps them to understand the business logic. So hopefully we are not the only one, and it could be a separate session to talk more about this thing that we applied on the project, and yeah, in more details. Okay, maybe the last one. I see that I think we are in the last minute of presentation. Do managers and other teammates really write BDD tests in your team? That's a really good question. From my experience, I worked in 2 or 3 companies where I applied this concept. Only in one company, in one project, it actually happened. So I'm now explaining you this possibility that everyone can do it. Not everyone is really interested in it. So mostly it was done by a development team, but on one project we actually had a business analyst who was performing a role of a product owner, maybe something like that, and he was actually providing us user stories that we had on our grooming sessions. So we come to the grooming session, we see structured user stories which we need to work out a bit more, and we have our acceptance criteria already in BDD scenarios. Yeah, that was, but it's a good question, and yeah, that is the fact. Okay, we have one more. Is it possible to simply test multi-local app with same tests? I'm not sure I understand It's possible to simply test multi-local app with the same tests. If you could elaborate on a question, if we have time. So, are you referring to running an app on your local machine and have few of them? Oh, multi-language app. Of course. You can do all sorts of things. So you can, as I said, it's really up to your imagination how we'll utilize those parameters. So, for example, let's say that you have, I don't know, simple scenarios. You probably have in mind things like having the web application on Russian, English, and you want to test it by saving some lines of code, not to write double test. You can prepare your configuration files separately for the language, and then just depending on the tag, for example, you use your Russian tag in your above your test scenario, you use English tag above it, and then for the certain type of language, do certain things. Of course, we would need to sit down and work out how we would actually do it, but I believe it's really possible. Haven't done it myself, but it's interesting question and idea, multi-language application. Okay, and how do you organize complex and integration BDD tests? Actually, I had a chance to write, of course, more complex solutions than the one I showcased. So, and I'm referring to solution where we have API calls and the UI testing. So what we did, we had two projects inside one solution, one for the API, one for the UI. We had external reference to the one for the API, and then in our before feature, it was mostly before feature, not before scenario, we did some, let's say, creating of the project, the users by calling some endpoints, then deserializing the response that we got, and putting some values into temporary memory. It's also something that SpecFlow allows you to do using scenario context. We didn't have a chance today to go all through these details, but anyway, you save this into the temporary memory, and then once you have generated this data and you saved its constants and value, you transfer yourself and continue your scenario on the user interface, doing the UI tests, and then at the end, after feature, you again call some endpoints just to clean up what you have created in your tests. So it's quite fun, and yeah, it can be done. Okay, I really want to thank you for your questions. They were quite good and interesting, and I'm really sorry that I couldn't be there in Moscow, unfortunately, but hopefully next time and next year I will be able to travel and come on site. Okay, I think that's everything.